Right. So I'm Tim Melling. I've been leading for Naturetrek since the late 1990s, 20 odd years now. I've led all over the world, including South America, and it's southern Chile that I'm taking you today. And you've probably guessed by my opening slide that one of the target species that we want to see in southern Chile is puma. And but we'll be coming to those a bit later on. So the main place that we stay is the Torres del Paine National Park, which is absolutely spectacular. You'll be seeing a lot of these mountains as we go on, but we usually arrive in Punta Arenas and then we have to drive several hours to reach the Torres del Paine National Park. So and the drive through the habitat there usually enables you to pick up a few interesting species en route. Every time somebody stops something, we holler to slow down the minibus and have a look. And there are things like Darwins or lesser rheas just by the side of the roadside, getting really good close views of those. This is the smaller, slightly smaller of the two flightless rhea species that occur in South America. The other one's further north in Brazil. That's the greater rhea. Southern lapwing is another species that you see commonly down in the south there. You can see it's curiously similar to the lapwing that we get in Britain, but with a plain grey hoodie on it. And it's also got some real sharp spurs on the leading edge of its forewing. I've watched them fighting, but it's really difficult to capture those in a photograph. Upland geese, very, very common. Great sexual dimorphism in these. That's the male on the right, the female on the left, and you always see them in pairs, but they're by the roadside wherever you drive in southern South America. And we pass several lakes too. Lots of Chilean flamingos on these lakes, often quite distant. These were all taken by me from the car traveling through, so it's not like in a zoo or a collection in Britain. You know, you see them as proper wild flamingos doing what wild flamingos do. The black-necked swans also, we usually stumble across those on the lakes there, and various species of ducks, including the yellow-billed pintail and things like Chiloe widgeon as well there. But it's really the Torres del Paine National Park that we're trying to get to, and this is the lake where we stay in the national park. I took that on a very calm day. Unfortunately, the clouds were covering the mountains, so that wasn't quite as spectacular as it could have been. But that's a typical view of the lakeside there. We have a drive around in amongst the mountains, and there's one lake in particular that goes by the rather prosaic name Grey Lake, and here it's you can see with the icebergs and things, but in this sandy beach on the edge of Grey Lake, that's where we saw our first evidence that there were pumas in the area. At this point, we still hadn't seen a puma, but to see these huge, great footprints going through the sand showed that there had been one there not too long ago, so our hopes were high. But before we leave Grey Lake, what a terrible name for such a spectacular lake, where a glacier comes off the back of the mountain range and carves icebergs into an inland lake. You know, it's almost like going to Windermere and seeing icebergs floating around in it. Really fabulous thing to see. In the lakes and the slow-flowing rivers, there's the biggest grebe in the world, the great grebe, Podiceps major. It's even bigger than a great crested grebe, about a pound heavier on average there. And there are some great waterfalls on the rivers there. And where you get these really fast-moving water, that's a good place to see the torrent duck. That's a male torrent duck there. These only occur in the really fast-moving rivers on of the Andes. That's the only place on the planet that you can see torrent ducks. And a bit rarer, this is actually near threatened now. This is the spectacled duck, and the sexes are identical. They occur on slow-moving rivers. The other name for them is bronze-winged duck, but because of the colour of the speculum, the shiny bit on the back of the wing. But like all ducks, it has iridescence, and when you see it from certain angles, it looks a coppery bronze colour. But from this angle where I took it, it looks rather magenta and much prettier than the bronze colour. So, but that's another bird that we usually see on the rivers down in the south of Chile. And black-faced ibis is common. That's been split from the northern the ibis that occurs in the Amazon area and the Pantanal. Lots of the birds down here have the name Austral, which means southern. Australia is the southern land, and Austral just means southern. And this is the Austral thrush, a relative of the American robin, as you'll probably guess. But this one only occurs right in the far south of of South America, also on the Falkland Islands as well. And the Austral blackbird, which, as you probably guessed by its beak shape, that it isn't a blackbird at all. It's related to the icterids, it's the orioles and caciques and things like that. I liked its scientific name, Cureus cureus, but Cureus is just a local name for it, and that was incorporated into the scientific name. And because they were a bit later in giving English names, that they had to concoct English names. So very often you get three-part names like this one, the tufted tit tyrant, and you even get four-part names there. Those are very common. Now, the thing about tufted tit tyrant, apart from being an absolutely excellent bird and looks very like a crested tit, is it's one of about 1,000 birds that evolved out of the songbird line many years ago, really early on in the evolution of the songbirds, and they have a completely different structure of the syrinx in the throat, which is the bit that forms a song, completely different. They call these birds subocines. There are only about 1,000 species, and most of these are in South America, and that includes tufted tit tyrant, but it's many South American birds that you might know, like cotingas and manakins and ovenbirds and tyrant flycatchers as well. Here's another one of them. This is the rufous-tailed plant cutter. I said you're going to be getting lots of these four-part names. A fabulous bird, but really inappropriately named because it's rufous almost everywhere, apart from its tail. Yeah, it's called the rufous-tailed plant cutter. I'm not going to give you too many scientific names, but where I think they're interesting, I'll put them in. It's Phytotoma rara. Now, Phytotoma means plant cutter because it does eat leaves and buds and things like that, a bit like our bullfinch does. And rara, that does mean rare in Latin, and they aren't that common, but this one was apparently named because the call it makes is rara, so it's onomatopoeic. So rufous-tailed plant cutter. There are all sorts of little lakes and things in the Torres del Paine National Park, and around there there's interesting things to see, like white-tufted grebes. It's like a black and white version of the black-necked grebe here. They're common on the pools down there. And the Andean duck, it's currently split from ruddy duck, but some authorities lump them, but always has the black head, unlike the white-faced ruddy duck of North America. And that's the only picture I managed to get of a plumbeous rail, but it was striding along the top like a tightrope walker across the top of the rushes on the edge of this. And just down in the bottom left there is a red gartered coot. There's a number of species of coots that you get down there. South America is obviously the epicenter of coot evolution, and grebes as well. So you get a lot more species down there. This is looking high down on Lake Piho. That island down there you can see is where our hotel is, and we access it down that little wooden footbridge that you can see leading onto it. And this lovely red orange flower in the foreground goes by the name of guanaco splash. I didn't ask about the origin of that. Presumably it's got something to do with where the guanacos go, but it's a great source of nectar, sugary fluid, which birds need for their calories. So you often see birds attracted to it. And here's the rufous-collared sparrow, which is it's common over much of South America, very common down there, familiar. You often see it around houses. When I was down there, I photographed this bird and I wasn't sure what it was. And I went to open up my Chilean book and I thought, oh, this will be really easy finding a grey bird with a bright yellow throat. And I homed in on the yellow throat and I went through every single species and could not find it anywhere. And then I thought, hang on a minute, am I doing something wrong here? Ignore the yellow throat. And of course, it was a plumbeous Sierra finch, and the yellow throat was just the nectar because it had been feeding on the guanaco splash flowers and it had got some pollen on its throat. And I thought that was a feather feature, which wasn't in the books there. Another Sierra finch is the grey-hooded Sierra finch. They're called finches, but these are actually tanagers, which is another one of these subossine groups from South America. The scaly-throated earth creeper as well. There are about 10 species of earth creeper, and I've put the scientific name in there because I think it's brilliant. Eupucerthia, and those of you that know about scientific names will see that that's a concatenation of two familiar European birds. Eupupa is the name for a hoopoe, and certhia is the name for a tree creeper. And you can see, so it's basically a hoopoe tree creeper of the thickets. That's what Dumetaria means. Lots of interesting little things like this. The fire-eyed diucon is a local name for it, but its scientific name, pyrope means fire-eyed, which is exactly what its English name is, and you can see the lovely red eye there. The turquoise in the background is the Lake Piho where we stay. It's a lovely turquoise color when the light catches it. Another one of these, they're called oven birds because some of the species build clay nests like an oven. And this is the thorn-tailed rayadito. There's only two species of rayadito, and this is the one that we get in southern Chile. Rayadito just is, I'm told, is Spanish for little stripy thing. And you can see the thorn tails there. And I did take one more picture of it because it just looks so angry there, looking straight at me with its bill. It seems to have got a frowning mouth, looking angrily at the camera. Austral parakeet, that's the most southerly parrot on the planet, occurs right the way down to the southern tip of southern South America, but that's another species that we often see in the Nothofagus forest down there. And dark-bellied Synclodes, there's again about 10 to 15 species of Synclodes in South America. Synclodes means dipper-like or resembling a dipper, and they're not related at all to them because they're oven birds, but they look like them, and you often get them near water as well. So Synclus is the scientific name for a dipper. So Synclodes is like a dipper, and there's several species we see down there. I've just put a couple of them in there. It's called white-winged because when it flies, there's a big white flash in its wing there. But pumas are the thing that we want to see. The same species that they call cougars in North America and mountain lion, but puma is the South American name, so we'll go with that. So they're most active at dusk and dawn. So we always make sure that we're out when the greatest activity is there. And we were trying to get as many sightings as we could. And when I was down there, we saw 19 different pumas in the 5 or so days that we spent down there. Some of them were quite distant like this, but you can see there, that is a mother with 3 cubs following her. So that was 4 of the ones that we saw. But when after the dawn and dusk hotspots for puma, there's plenty of other things to see, including Andean condors. They're very, very common down there. That's a male with that great caruncle, the great shield on his head there. And here's a female that lacks that, just got the fluffy neck collar. Huge, great things, but again, a great iconic bird to see down there. So, and black-chested buzzard eagle as well. You just see these on roadside posts and things and feeding on roadkill in the roads. But it's a huge thing. That's a juvenile, by the way, but these things have got a 2-meter wingspan. They're as big as golden eagles, yet they're as common as buzzards down there. And southern crested caracara. The caracaras, you've probably heard that when people have started studying the DNA of birds of prey, they've found that falcons are completely unrelated to all the other birds of prey, like eagles and hawks and stuff like that. Really, it's just convergent evolution that made them look the same. But caracaras are actually the same family as falcons, so they're this other group. And there's a close close-up of one of these southern crested caracaras. This actually is the second heaviest falcon on the planet. Gerfalcon is the only thing that can top it in weight, a very, very big, substantial one. And much commoner and much smaller is the Chimango caracara. Chimango is another local name for it, but you see these like kestrels over the roadsides and often in largish numbers as well. Here's just a typical bridge that we have to drive across. No, I'm joking. The new bridge was near the side. That was just an old rickety bridge that had been left in place there. And I just thought it made quite a nice photograph, and it shows you what the habitat's like. So I mentioned guanaco splash, the flower, earlier. Guanacos are very, very common all over the Torres del Paine National Park, and they're a wild relative of llama. In fact, the scientific name is Llama guanaco, and you see great flocks of them feeding on the grasslands around there. Now, when they've got their heads down and feeding like this, you know that there's no danger about. They're very, very relaxed and chilled, and that's what they do. And when they're really relaxed and chilled, sometimes they do other interesting things, like have a dust bath right by the side of the road here. Watch this one rolling over like a dog does. And but when they've all got their heads up and they're all looking in the same direction with their ears forward like that, that is usually indication that there's a predator about, and they make a little squeaking noise that they only ever make when there is a puma about. So you know, if you hear that noise, you've got to scour the hillside looking for a puma. And they're often not as easy as you might think to spot. You'd think a great big cat, but they're a sandy coloured cat, and and they often stay to the shadows and the bushes, and the ground, the habitat is very sandy coloured, so they can be difficult to spot. But all these were taken, you know, just from the roadside as we were driving around looking for pumas. One time during the middle of the day, we stopped by a beautiful lake with reflections of the mountains there, and we were just having a look and seeing what birds were on there. And there was some flying steamer ducks there, and there was the silvery grebes, a big flock of those. And then we saw two guanacos herring past, chasing each other like mad. I thought, oh, what's going on there? Is it two rival males? And then just a couple of seconds later, this puma just came running straight past them at the same on the same trajectory, and it was losing ground on them all the time, but it carried on going. And that's what made me think it was probably a young puma that hasn't realized that you don't chase guanacos over a large distance, because they'll just gain ground on you. They're much faster, but the pumas are faster in a short little dash. So what pumas usually do is they hunt stealthily. They creep using the bushes, just like this, you know, not making a sound, just gradually moving through. And then if they can get within 20 meters of a guanaco without being spotted, they're off. But they're usually in big herds, and they're all on the lookout all the time for these things. A few other birds that you see around there, the long-billed meadowlark. You've probably seen the yellow and black meadowlarks that you get in North America. Well, this is the long-billed one, which is bright scarlet and black instead. A very handsome bird there. And a true falcon that you get down there. That is the American kestrel. They just caught a lizard. I don't know what kind of lizard it was. I tried to find out, but drew a blank there. But this one was one we just found a puma that was stalking, and then it noticed us, and it's just making eye contact with a wild cat like this. It stopped what it was doing and just stared straight back at us. You know, it still sends shivers down my spine when I see a big puma like this. And this was just two youngsters whilst the mother had gone off hunting for a guanaco, and they were just mucking about and playing. You can see one there, they've been climbing over each other, and one's got its tail wrapped around the other one's neck. But it's really good, and we were seeing pumas every single day. We saw a few other mammals as well. This is the Patagonian hognose skunk, and this is the culpeo, the South American red fox, and this is the chilla, or South American grey fox, a slightly smaller one. But we saw all of these. But it's the pumas that are the stars of the show. When I told a friend of mine who does a lot of astrophotography that I was going down to Patagonia, he said he was so envious and said, oh, they have brilliant Milky Ways down in the Southern Hemisphere, far better than you ever see in Britain. You know, and he gave me a crash course on what to do. And I'd never photographed the night sky before, but I listened to his lessons. And so at night, I went out and pointed the camera. And these were the first efforts I ever managed, but getting the spectacular snow-covered peaks in the background with a really bright Milky Way going over and Lake Pio in the foreground there. And there's another one as well with the Milky Way going across the sky, but it really is brighter than I've ever seen the Milky Way in this country. And there's the moon setting. So I mentioned that we set off and we arrive and we set off from Punta Arenas, which is on the coast. And so it's often a good place to pick up a few more birds. I showed you the flying steamer duck earlier, and these are the very similar but flightless steamer ducks that you get at the coast there. And blue-eyed shag, that was another common bird, and rock shag as well. Good numbers of those at Punta Arenas. Magellanic oyster catchers, and also a few seabirds that I managed to see. Southern fulmars, which surprised me because in Antarctica we usually only see those when they're really far south, and Punta Arenas is quite far north and tucked in. And this as well, southern giant petrel, which amazed me. This was actually taken from the beach at Punta Arenas. It wasn't taken on an Antarctic trip where they're 10 a penny. This was just off the beach there. So another great bird to see. And I'm going to leave you with a sunset. Actually, this is a sunrise, but it looks like a sunset. And there's a puma at sunrise. There's two pumas actually there, if you look very carefully, and with a sky background. This was before I was taking raw images, so I couldn't process it to bring up the any detail in the puma's face. So you'll have to make do with silhouettes, but I thought it was quite a dramatic shot to finish on. Okay, thank you very much indeed.